She said, I am tired that nobody's talking about nourishing the world. And it was a very interesting reframe of the conversation that we will have, because food systems today, they feed, but they don't nourish. And so part of the planetary health narrative and context is so important when you see the food system that I am now working on. And it's so interesting because of so many of these cross-cutting issues that we're going to discuss today. And today we talk a lot about why this the planetary health is so important in this conference, because we have what we call the 3 C's, right? We have the COVID, climate, conflict. And now I go to conference, they added a 4th C, the unprecedented cost of living crisis. And these 4 C's, 3 C's are leading to what we call the 5F. Anybody? What are the 5F? Food, feed, fuel, fertilizers, and lack of finance crisis. So we always start with crisis everywhere. And I said, now you're confused because you wanted to be an inspirational session. I'm depressing you with 5 Fs, 3 Cs for us. So we need to, we are here today to change this narrative. So exactly to start, not how I am doing. So it's a counterexample today. And of course, the planetary health usually tends to, we feel overwhelmed. Who doesn't go home? Sometimes he said, I feel like giving up. I do sometimes. So, and the planetary health is really this framework that encourages us to use evidence-based policies to promote human health and prosperity, shared prosperity, while also preserving the environment. Of course, it's such a important part and fundamental to our well-being. But every day when we have, I like the example of food again, because when we have breakfast in the morning, we have this encounter with nature. But so it's problematic. We see 3 billion people who cannot afford a healthy diet. 1 out of 10 people go to bed hungry every day. And at the same time, we are wasting 1/3 of the food that we produce. But together, it's not only the food, it's the natural resources that we use, the land to produce, we are contaminating. So it's, again, stretching planetary boundaries really beyond safe limits. But what are we doing to make this planetary health vision? How does the world would look like if planetary health was a reality? That's a question that I would like us to think today. Research shows that if you do a more sustainable agriculture, if you have healthier diets, if we invest, reduce food loss, protect and restore nature, we're going to have better lives, more jobs, economic gains. However, we keep using our resources in a not so smart way. In the example that I'm using, we know that are at least $600 billion each year on agricultural subsidies. But if you see 70% go to the direct income support, but only 5% of this support goes for conservation or sustainability goals. So the paradox is here is that cheap food these days is expensive for people and the planet. And revealing this true cost would really bring a lot of the progress that we wanted to see. And that's what planetary health is about. We want to reimagine human health in times of this induced environmental change, the human-made problems that we are created. And it's not only climate change, right? We're talking about the triple planetary health crisis, the crisis of biodiversity, of pollution. And we keep seeing that one of the things that I'm very pleased of this panel today is it's about one word that could help us to save a lot is diversity. When you see that only 15 crops provide 90% of our food energy intake, 2/3 coming from only rice, wheat, and maize, we see that there's something needs to change. We know that there are around 30,000 edible plant species in the world, and more than 6,000 crops have been cultivated in human history, but only 200 make into this global market. So I'm very pleased. We wouldn't be here today if also I would like to acknowledge the work of here Dan Sandman, who helped us so with organizing, and of course Kim Grutzmacher for putting all this amazing panel together. Big round of applause. It's not easy. We have really top speakers today, and this we'll try the menu for change and how we can really talk about the power of storytelling, how planetary health can help us and make maybe break some gridlocks in decision making. So our speakers, we're going to have about an introduction, a conversation, some initial remarks from each of them. Then we're going to have an interaction, and I would like to, of course, have your participation. Please, you will have time to pose questions. So let's keep it as interactive interactive as possible. So to start, I would like to have Dr. Eckhard von Hirschhausen. I'm always working on my German. He's, of course, a physician, science journalist, and founder of the foundation Healthy Planet and Healthy People. You have studied medicine and science journalism in Berlin, London, Heidelberg, and for more than 25 years, you've been on the road as a moderator, a speaker, a motivator on stage, and of course, trying to bring all this very heavy conversation with some humor. So we hope the inspiration also will come from you today. Please, you have the floor for 7 minutes.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. Thank you, Nicole. Let's hurry up before the fire alarm rings. In a way, I'm confused, and probably not the only person in this room being confused. When I try to speak to people and they try to take a picture of not very interesting chart. Welcome, good morning. I know what the really use of the badges is. After 2 days of World Health Summit, you can check your own name sometimes. Who am I? What am I doing? And Nicole, you said it bravely, there are so many crises that we run out of C's. And we run out of F's, and there's one F. It's fuck. So my story is very easy. Get more people involved, get more money involved, and don't lose hope. And because this is a scientific conference, I must say, science shows that showing people research doesn't work. We're not lacking data. We're not lacking evidence. We're not lacking urgency. But Maria, we're just talking about this. It's so frustrating to be in this field for many decades, and many of you are doing a great job. And all the things that go to media will be the protests, and very little of the urgency within this room. And so as a media person, I want to give you some ideas of how you can use the way media works in a better way to address the real urgent questions. Donald, you put together some slides. I will be surprised which slides I'm going to present. It's a bit like PowerPoint karaoke. Storytelling for planetary health. I don't know, many of you were at the session yesterday. Nicole, you said it's women driving this conversation. Thanks for that. It's for me the best example that I have about storytelling. There's this abstract figure that we were talking about yesterday on 2 panels. 7 to 9 million people die each year of air pollution, and nobody cares. Human interest is in other humans and not in digits. So tell the story like Rosamund does of her daughter dying of an asthma attack in the middle of London. And when the pathologist opened her chest, he said she looked as if she had been smoking for many years. And she fought in front of court for 7 years not to have asthma attack on the death certificate, but air pollution. And she became the first testimonial worldwide to say what is killing us. And so I want you to see a little snippet of the interview. And the session from yesterday was very impressive. It's online. And this is a great example.
My daughter became suddenly ill with one of the worst cases of asthma, the pathologist said, in the UK. And last year, after a 7-year long battle, we finally got air pollution on her death certificate. So she's the first person in the world to have air pollution on her death certificate.
This is part of a movie that I did in Glasgow about the climate and health connection. You find it on our website, and it's in German, but many of the people I talk to obviously speak English. We need personal stories. Why am I convinced that the climate protection equals health protection narrative works? Because people like Cornelia Betsch, who does a great job as a Heisenberg professor in Erfurt about communication and psychology, she's proven it. And what's important, this narrative works for people of different ages, different parties. It's not a ideological framework that easily gets bashed back before it's understood, but it's something that's really dear to us. So it's a cross-party consent. And another great organization is Climate Outreach. We had Amira yesterday on the panel. She said so many amazing things why we have to prove more the efficacy of the ways we are communicating. And we have to be much more specialized in value-adapted communication to certain groups of society. How do we reach out to conservatives? Talk about things that are dear to them. Talk about the forest, the beauty of nature. What is Heimat? That doesn't really translate, but a sense of home. And so this is very important, that no message fits everyone, but you have to think first in the value system of the other, and then start the conversation. And from there on, if you have found common ground, common values, then you can start with a personal story. You know what I'm worried about, and how does it resonate with you? Very, very important work. More in common. Health is a priority for all segments of society. And this is important. If you're talking, why do you ask, how are you? When we celebrate birthday, what do you wish? Saúde. So this works for everyone, no matter of their political stance or their attitude towards these topics. All segments believe that climate protection can have a positive impact on health of animals, plants, and humans. Some people care more about animals, so talk about the animals. Some talk about plants, some talk about bigger issues. And one other clue, and I welcome Teresa Krüger in the room, who does a great job with Health for Future and many other things. She was, to my knowledge, the first person to do a study on solastalgia. Raise your hands if you're familiar with the concept of solastalgia. Yeah, it's a relatively new term, but it's important to have the mental health consequences of the loss of the sense of integrity of nature, of things that you loved as a child are gone. And Teresa did a study close to a coal mine, open coal mine, Kohletagebau in Garzweiler. And we were there at one of the hottest days in the summer 2 years ago. And I use this picture in every presentation because it shows one very simple thing that's also not easily to grasp. Why do we measure Treibhausgase, greenhouse gases, in tons? People don't get the idea. Well, why is a gas weighing something? And when you look at what is missing there in the coal mine, you can ask easily, where do you think all this physical matter went to? Where is it now? It's above us. This weighs tons. This is easily understood, that when you burn it, it still weighs tons. That's difficult to grasp. But to really use practical thinking, when I do presentations, I always have an apple with me. Why? Because an apple is an everyday object. When you talk to people about the atmosphere, you think, well, outside, it's a nice day. You look up and you think the sky is endless. And you have to take an apple or a picture of the Earth showing that the atmosphere is a really thin line. It's as delicate as the skin of an apple. And suddenly people can relate to something that's bigger than themselves. So use practical examples. get out there where the people are. This is a rock concert. Many people are involved. This is a cradle-to-cradle concept where the piss gets recycled, and you suddenly talk about phosphate as one of the planetary boundaries. Let's work together and form new agile communities and use other people who are talking about food, for example, on Instagram with millions of followers. Use channels that already exist. We don't have time to build up many new channels, but use channels that are there and try to get ideas of food waste, of planetary health diet, of why don't we do a great barbecue party and halve all the cattle in the world. We would have meat for everyone who likes meat for one day, and on day 2, we would have enough food for everyone on this planet if we reduce the amount of animals being fed by things that people can eat. These are simple stories, so please tell them and give me hope.
Thank you so much, Eka, and you saw this photo from last year. We're aging, we need fast transformation here. But the good thing you're saying, the planetary health community is a very strong one, and probably what fascinates is this ability to bring communities together. And it would talk about the value system. It's not only we don't need more data, we need more wisdom, probably. So it gives me a great pleasure to invite another fantastic speaker, Dr. Maria Neyer, who's going to talk about the role of international organizations in planetary health. And also we need a lot of this, a lot of the gridlock is on the political level, right? So how can we leverage planetary health diplomacy, something that I'm sure that everybody will be very interested in. Of course, you're a veteran public health and environmental social determinants of health. You've been working as the director of the climate change and health of the World Health Organization since 2005. So I'll be short with my bio. If you allow me, please. Dr. Maria, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And since we are on a panel, almost all of us, we are women, with all due respect. Let me have a very woman approach here. This is not WHO talking. This is a public health woman officer. We tend to be very pragmatic as women. So we are the ones that we can think about the birthday of our mother-in-law, and at the same time discussing on a very high level at the World Health Summit, and thinking on taking some chocolates back to Geneva for our children and things like that. So because we have with this comprehensive and holistic, I'm not saying that you don't. Just to have something. I don't like sausages, so. Anyway, let's have this very pragmatic approach and see what is the issue. I used to be a real doctor. Actually, I was trained on endocrinology. I'm an endocrinologist for one reason, because on endocrinology, they invented what we call the feedback. So the logic is fantastic. The level of hormones is going down. Well, you tell the TSH to go up and rebalance everything again. So that logic was my inspiration from the beginning. All the human body is a one, and then you have this system of feedback, which is logic. Unfortunately, in the world, that logic was not exactly the same, and we have so many structural things that we need to change. When I was, my first mission to the field was on cholera. Well, it was on a refugee camp, but then we had a huge cholera outbreak. And then there I realized again what that means, a holistic approach to a problem. Some people during the cholera outbreak were going out and saying, there is a cholera outbreak, there is a cholera outbreak, alert, alert, there is a cholera outbreak. Other people were going and preparing the hospital to receive all of the patients. But nobody was going out and saying, okay, there is a cholera outbreak. So please wash your hands. This is the clean water. This is a point for distribution of chlorine to chlorinate your water. Please, on the food, make sure that you boil it before you eat it. Make sure that you dispose your feces. If you have these symptoms, come to this place. I mean, the plan, the complete plan of what to do. And I think on this climate change, we are missing that plan. We have, in one hand, all the apocalyptic messages, and we are all part of that, clearly. Al Gore was the first one telling us the inconvenient truth and putting an alert there. So the question now is, what do we do with that alert? What next? So let me present you my non-apocalyptic or the post-apocalypse plan, or to avoid the apocalyptic. I think it will be much better. One, I think evidence, as you say, we have it. Now we need to make sure that we use this evidence on a good sense approach. I mean, what we are talking about here is common sense. It's all about common sense. Do the basics. Stop destroying nature. I was about to say another horrible word, but I don't want to say it. So stop this.
in Spanish.
No, it's even worse. No. It's very, very strong in Spanish. No. So we need to pass that coherent message, all of us, from FAO to WHO to NGOs, civil society, women, anyone, please give a sample, pass that coherent message, stop destroying biodiversity, ecosystems, don't do it yourself, recycle, give the right example on that. That is a basic public health measure. Second, make sure that we invest on the basic, the so-called no regrets investments. What is wrong on investing on water, sanitation? That will be good for everything, for food production, for women's health, for stopping climate change, for making sure that we take people out of poverty. Those are the logic, common sense approaches. Third, make sure that we all do good. What do I mean by that? If you are working on polio eradication, and Bill Gates announced yesterday that there will be 1.2 billion, please use it on a coherent, convergent, logical way. Means don't use diesel for keeping your vaccine alive on a refrigerator. Use a solar panel. If you are engaging on a polio eradication program, make sure that the health facility, when you leave, will have a solar panel to provide services to all of that. That's not polluting, and that is more sustainable and climate resilient. If you are working on malaria, the same, make sure that you're impregnated bed nets. We are all working on climate change, all of us, but we need to be very coherent and very convergent, and in all of our programs incorporate the basic of the problems. Third, or four, I don't know. If you are working on pandemic prevention is all about what we are talking here. It's all about making sure that you stop the destruction, that you do more on animal health, environmental health, and human health, whatever we call it, One Health, pandemic preparedness, planetary health, climate change. We need to be better on branding our products. Sometimes I feel jealous about the private sector. They have a soda drink that I will not nominate. They do a nice bottle. They do a very good branding. They put it on the market, and they ensure that the product is everywhere globally. We are not doing that. We are not good at branding because we have so many brands. We are not good at selling one product, which is the basic primary prevention strategy, a massive primary prevention strategy. We have an incredible opportunity here. And then maybe we need to go for more. Okay, at global level, and seriously now as WHO, we are going to COP. We will have the health pavilion there. And our message is health argument for more climate action. And then what we are doing is saying, okay, if you guys, you do your work on stopping the climate change, if you do mitigation, the food systems will be sustainable, and therefore there will be healthy diets, and we can reduce millions of deaths with that. So positive messages. If you guys are good on mitigating climate change by promoting sustainable transport at the city level, by ensuring this transition to clean sources of energy, we will give you millions of deaths that we can avert because you will be reducing air pollution and you will be having clean air, and we will reduce the cost for the health system. So plenty of health benefits that will come for interventions all around the basics of so we all need to push into that direction on the benefits that we can obtain if we stop the causes of climate change. This is a public health agenda. I always say that the Paris Treaty, if you look at the recommendations under the Paris Treaty, is a basic public health agenda. Basic is whatever I will recommend if I have the opportunity. My last point is, well, at the pavilion on the COP, you will see lungs, because when the first time I met Rosamund, and Rosamund has made more for this cause than many other people around the world. When we first met, I said, this is the type of messages we need. People doesn't understand planetary health or the planet, the glacier and the polar bears. People understand my child asthma. And the word asthma has been opening so many doors. I mean, it's incredible. He has created what the French call the déclic, something that changed completely. Asthma, because people then realize that they see it. So that's why on the storytelling, at the health pavilion, I've been fighting with the UNFCCC and saying, okay, anytime you have a COP20 something, you have this big planet. Instead of the planet or together with the planet, please have a couple of lungs. Mm-hmm. And still there, yeah. Well, I want a couple of lungs very visible. Because they are not doing it, we are doing it. So on our health pavilion, we have a beautiful artist who did some bronchios, very artistic, but you realize that those are lungs. And this is what we care about. We need to bring people to our own health. And I think that will be the best way to, put this machine in motion, finally. My final point, not very institutional again, I want a white coats revolution. We need to mobilize the world of the health professionals from here to here. I mean, health professionals means many actors from a very large spectrum. Yes, the credibility of the health sector is still there, is very strong. So we need to create that network, that we have it. Last year, we put 45 million signatures of doctors around, and then that was very powerful. This year, we need to go for more. And if we create this white coat revolution, I think finally we will create a movement that people will remember and care about. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Clear call to action, a white coat revolution. And thank you for highlighting that planetary health is everyone's business. We do need to be better at this branding. And so I would like to continue with Dr. Suzanne Hecker, who is the chair of the European Citizen Science Association, head of the science program, Society and Nature at the Natural History Museum in Berlin. And you're going to talk about what is citizen science and how is it evolving? How can planetary health benefit from it? Very important connection now to the social movement. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Nicole, for the nice introduction. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Donald, for bringing me here to the World Health Summit. So thank you very much for all the inputs that already are here in the room through Nicole and then Eckhart and Maria. Don't give up. No, of course we don't. We can't. I mean, there is no alternative. And before I show you my slides and talk about citizen science, I watched a film at a neighbor farm on Saturday, which was about Solavi in German, and in English it's community-supported agriculture. And that film that was made by independent filmmakers, it's not out there yet. It was a crowdfunded initiative, and what they did is they visited 3 different of those farms that were very different in how they set up that community engaged agriculture. But what was so impressive to me when I watched that film, and that hits the point that Nicole mentioned earlier, is that food should nourish people, and I love that expression. and you could see in the film that the food they gave to the people, and the people came to those farms to catch their food, and they were talking to each other. And not only the people receiving healthy, local, fresh food directly from the farm, but also the farmers. They were happy, they were glad, they loved what they were doing because they were in contact with nature. They were actually working for their own mental and physical health and giving that to the people and exchanging that with people. So that was, and maybe you can call that a kind of citizen science, though the science part is missing. But it's that kind of public engagement that we need, that people really get into communication at doing stuff, right? I mean, we as scientists tend to talk at people like I'm doing right now. Sorry for that, but I hope that we can change that in the discourse of that session, and talking to each other. And what you do amazingly right now is listen to each other. I think that's one key point that we as scientists and researchers need to learn as well, and practice more often, deep listening to each other, and learn and acknowledge expertise that is not only scientific. And now here I come to the topic of my talk. What is citizen science? Well, you had the time to read what citizen science is. Basically, engaging people in scientific processes, working together with them, and bringing those different knowledges together, right? And instead of now going into theoretical discussions about, okay, what can it be, what's not citizen science, etc. This is boring stuff right now for this session. I just brought some examples for you to show you what citizen science can be in the frame of health and planetary health. For instance, one example is the COVID symptom app, which was developed firstly in the UK, but then spread to the US, the United States of America, and Sweden. And here people, the starting point, that was people in the UK, they were very discontented with public data on COVID symptoms at the time. So they addressed UCL, University College London, and together with a young startup, they built that app where people can log in their symptoms they have suffered through COVID, and also now it has been enlarged to vaccine symptoms they might have or see on their bodies. And now the government has said at a certain point, when millions of people literally put their data in there, so they had daily data, open data, that they could use for arguing, for example, with their local administration on COVID. Now the government has said, oh, this data is really, really good, actually. And they now include this data in their databases, and this is really pushing up the whole initiative. But that was really citizen-led, and a very, very nice example of what citizen science in that sense can do. We heard about air pollution, and thank you for that very, very deeply motioning example that you brought, Eckhart, this morning, and that statement of that lady. We know that air pollution is a major problem, not only in Europe, but worldwide, and air pollution. So what can citizen science do to alleviate this burden? Instead of talking to people, really let people do something so that they feel they are part of a community that addresses the whole issue. Let's do things together, right? Because doing is better than learning through words. It's really, you see that she's touching this sign, and it's a very, very low-cost sensor that is hanging outside the building in Antwerp. Here, this example where people could measure the air pollution in their areas. And studies show that people who participated in that study actually changed their behavior when they saw the results around Antwerp. For instance, they started using more the bike or public transport instead of taking their car. They chose different routes around main traffic or air polluted areas to get to work. Or wherever they had to go, kindergarten or wherever, to make their shopping. But not only on a local scale, but also you can see here in the Netherlands where samenmeten, so that means collecting together. So people collected data on air pollution throughout the Netherlands. That was a citizen science project too. So you can really, don't give up, not only on a local level, but also on regional level, and then also, of course, a global level. This is what citizen science can do to bring people together with scientific data, and then, of course, with policy, and let people talk together. And policy was very interested here in this project, and they work together with scientists and the citizens. Another very different example I bring you here is a lovely meadow you see here in Austria. The photo comes from a project, a citizen science project, where farmers are invited to participate and monitor their meadows, where so they look at the biodiversity in their meadows, like looking at the plants they have. There might be some very common species, but also rare species like orchids or whatever that people don't recognize. They don't know what it is. But if they participate in the citizen science projects, they can just register this and say, what is it? And then they come into interaction with the scientists, and they also get training. They get support in watching the biodiversity on their meadows. And what I love in the second picture is what I love about this picture is those are farmers, and you can see that their task here is to pull that string, right? And so to mark the field that they should monitor. What they do instead, they hold the string, but what they do instead, they all have their fingers out and point at something, right? So it's like, oh, look at this. Oh, have you seen that? Oh, hush, don't move. There's an animal. You really can see that they are into this. They are connected with the nature they are in, right? And this is their meadows. This is the project, which is the studies show that people really get involved and get ownership for their meadows. What does that mean? Well, how does that relate to planetary health? If you have an ownership for your meadow, where you cut the grass at a certain point, for instance, because, well, eventually it's agriculture territoria, but you know what you're cutting. You increase the diversity, and you can increase the healthiness of the food that you might provide for the animals or for human beings, whatever you use the herbs for, right? And then also it showed that the farmers started to look for restrictions for management, agricultural management, and change their practices around agriculture. Practices, for instance, mowing later in the year to protect, how do you say that, ground breeding birds, for instance. Right. And then finally, I would like to mention a project that we do at the Museum für Naturkunde together with the European Citizen Science Association, and supported by the DBU, German foundation, that we held at the 4th International Conference of Citizen Science just 10 days ago here in Berlin, where we had a session or a think camp together with participants of the conference, but also we invited people of the public to be there. And we had that think camp where one of the leading questions was, how can public engagement support planetary health in the area of food? This is part of a pilot study, a larger pilot study, where we want to bring together scientists, people of society, industry, like startups and everything, to think about that question. How can we engage and really do something together And then in the middle, you can see one of our organizers here of this session, Kim, my lovely colleague, discussing with the people there. And three of the main results that we had there were people were really engaged and creating great content and great results. So we kind of tried to cluster the results, and they were really about concrete measures for education and exchange between people and stakeholders, because food, of course, concerns everybody. Creating connections. I mean, that's what we are doing here as well, right? But doing that on very, very different levels also, and developing new practices. And I think through all this, the things I've shown you, and if you are more into the planetary health discussions, you know that 3 challenges have been mentioned through the so-called Rockefeller report. The imaginary challenge, and the research and information challenge, and the governmental challenge. And I think that through those initiatives where we work together, raise awareness, bring people back to be reconnected between nature and the things of their everyday lives that are relevant to people. These are really great ways to address those challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Susan. And I think the key word is ownership, and let them do something. When people get engaged, the chances that we will achieve something positive, they're much higher. So thank you so much for that. I would like to say that we're a little late, my dear panelists. So I'm being very generous because, as you can see, it's so interesting. So, but I do also want to make sure that we're going to have time for questions. My next guest is another Nicole Redvers. So is a member of the Denukö. I never pronounced that well. First Nation in the Northwest Territories, Canada. She's an associate professor and director of Indigenous Planetary Health at the School of Medicine and Dentistry at the University of Western Ontario, and the co-founder and past board chair of the Arctic Indigenous Wellness Foundation, based in Canada North. So, Nicole, you always bring a lot of knowledge. What do we mean by building this Indigenous power? And what does it matter for planetary health? Such an important topic for us. Thank you.
Masicho, thank you, Planete. Happy to be here. It's Denukö First Nation, but pretty good. It's always a tough one with that. I come from Dene peoples in subarctic Canada. De means flow, ne means land. The Dene peoples flow innately from the land. We are part of the land, an extension from the land. So when you take care of the land takes care of you. I come from an area that's warming at 3 times the global rate. We are not in a state of eco-anxiety in our region. We are in a state of ecological grief because the change is already occurring right now, and it has been for decades. This is a reality of our nation and our communities within many of the circumpolar areas of the globe that tend to be, unfortunately, neglected in a lot of the global health discourse that occurs in many circumstances. One of the things that's incredibly important that our elders have taught us for generations is stories that have been passed down through our memories of the regions, what they've looked like and how they've changed in the present. One of the things that's amazing is an elder that told me as a child, her grandfather, before he passed away in the 1960s, told her that there was going to be a time when the ground started to sink upon itself. And now we start to see the permafrost melting and lakes collapsing within itself within our region. She was told of a time where the axis of the earth would tilt slightly in a time of great change. And now we see, because of the melt of the polar spheres, that the weight distribution of the planet has now shifted the axis slightly. And our elders will now say that the stars are not in the same place as they used to be when they were children. She was told of a story when a sickness would start to rise from the ground. And we've seen in the last few years a family die of anthrax that came from the decomposing of an animal that had defrosted from the permafrost within the melt. So how did her grandfather know this back in the 1960s? It's because from an Indigenous scientific perspective, which is contextual, which is holistic, which is relational, which is not bound by time or space, and is based on real but also metaphoric narratives that come from the stories within our regions. And one of the most basic and fundamental components of indigenous knowledge, indigenous power, so to speak, is the ability to see the interconnectedness that we all have. Each and every person in this room is made of 60% water. So what does that mean? Where does the water come from that you drink out of your taps, depending on the regions that you come from? Berlin, the city itself, is fed by 9 waterways, from rivers and lakes, from aquifers within this region. So by an extension, 60% of your water is the lake. It is the river of the regions that you were raised and where you come from. You are the river, you are the lake. And this idea of going out into nature is a false pretense because we are in and of itself nature, and we've forgotten that as a society. The carbon within every component of our body is from long exploded stars that have been in the universe for billions of years. You hold that wisdom within inside of you, each and every one of you. And as indigenous communities, we say that we come from the stars. We're star people, we come from the sky. Yes, these are metaphoric narratives, but they're also real and physiological. From the rivers to the carbon to that interconnection that we have. So because of that, we have an innate responsibility of interconnection within ourselves to nature because we are in and of itself nature. Indigenous peoples currently host and steward 80% of the remaining world's biodiversity, yet make up 6% of the world's population. 6% of the world's population is holding our remaining 80% of the world's biodiversity and stewarding 1/3 of the remaining old growth forests. Perhaps that 6% is doing something right. Yet, in the spirit of scientific hegemony, we've often suppressed directly through cultural but also real genocide indigenous peoples around the world, minimizing their knowledge systems as simply folktale. So why do we need indigenous knowledges in this time? Because we are lost as a society. And maybe, just maybe, we've forgotten or tried to solve the same complex problems over and over again through the same worldview that created them. Maybe that's why it's not working. We're trying to solve the same complex problems from the same worldview that created them in the first place. So with that, a group of indigenous knowledge holders last year came together, and they noted that the social determinants of health is a common narrative within public health spaces, within medical spaces for decades, which is an important framework and important context. But the issue that we saw within this moment of crisis is that it often centers humans within that determinant conversation. So we wanted to say, well, wait a sec, what about the determinants of planetary health? Why don't we put the planet within the center of that consideration? And from an indigenous worldview, what is it? What are the factors that are going to make the planet well? That indigenous group of global representation came up with a number of determinants of planetary health, which you can now find in the literature. And a key parameter of that, which is also engaged centrally within the planetary health education framework that was also developed by planetary health scholars around the globe, rooted in the Planetary Health Alliance based at Harvard, was the interconnection within nature concept that we've lost. This relational aspect of being, where instead of focusing on variables alone within our scientific and applied and intervention practice, the way that we operationalize complex issues and solve problems, but instead focus on relationships and process. So we hear this in the new talk of systems thinking and complexity science, which probably is the closest way of thinking through indigenous scientific concepts as it pertains to applied practice. The focus on process and relationships over variables alone. So with that, my hope is, as we move forward within this critical time of society, that those 6% of the populations that have been marginalized, a disparity within a disparity, so to speak, around the globe, with a lack of state recognition in many countries, the two components that are needed are land rights for indigenous people so that they can continue stewarding those lands, health for indigenous people so that they can continue stewarding those lands, but also, funny enough, indigenous languages. Right now is the UN Decade of Indigenous Languages. And I often say Indigenous languages is probably one of the most impactful public health interventions that the world can have right now. Why is that? Because indigenous languages are verb-based. They're not noun-based. They're process-based. They teach a story of the land because they come from the land itself. Those lessons in learning of traditional ecological knowledges, but also the realities of our world, the science systems that we exist, are only because of the languages that we have. And we are losing one indigenous language every week or two within the world right now. So because of that, we need new ways of thinking. Let's think of new worldviews, new narratives, new stories to be able to come through these complex problems. Indigenous people have been waiting a long time for their voices to be recognized. My elder always says we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Perhaps it's time we listen. Masicho.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for this powerful talk. Like it's being, and we are nature, and we've forgotten, and that's a very important aspect of this conversation here. And of course, very impressive that the 80% remaining of our biodiversity being the guardians of our biodiversity. And I'm from Brazil, so of course, I also have a very important aspect of this conversation in my own country. I would like to continue with Melvin Otieno, who is the founder of the Planetary Health Eastern Africa Hub. She's a Planetary Health Alliance Next Generation Fellow and Associate Team Member of the Women Leaders for Planetary Health. Melvin, I think you're going to give us this contribution of how can we, the youth, be part of the change. We had a beginning of this conversation yesterday at the opening. And what are the main advantages for having the youth in decision-making in a meaningful way? Because that's, I think, where we are looking for. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Nicole, for the introduction. And it is really a pleasure attending the World Health Summit and speaking with you today on how the youth can be engaged in planetary health space and be a change maker. So I'm happy to say that in my journey as a planetary health advocate since 2019 as a campus ambassador, it has really been amazing to engage the student community and also our community at large in the planetary health space. And basically in the process, we ended up not only contributing or promoting planetary health in our university, but we also reached out to other universities in Kenya and enabling that we could also contribute further to other Eastern African communities. And in the process, we formed the Planetary Health Eastern African Hub, which is a regional community building and also provides education for transformative action. And also we influence policy by involving policymakers in our activities. So to just tackle the questions in answer and how can the youth be part of the change, I'm happy to present to you Sophia Project. This is strengthening planetary health in One Health in Eastern Africa. I don't know how to, sorry. Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. So I'm happy to present to you the strengthening of One Health and planetary health in East Africa. And this is a joint project by the University Hospital in Wurzburg and also together with the Catholic University in Mwanza, Tanzania, and also University of Eldoret, both situated in the Lake Victoria Basin. So the climate and ecological crises are considered fundamental health problems of our century, and increasing mobility and caused by heat waves and also other extreme weather leading to flooding, droughts, and wildfire has also risen concern. And but also negative effects, for instance, infectious diseases and also mental health distress that we have as a result of climate change, and also child health and non-communicable diseases as mediated through climate change and environmental deterioration. So just to take you through, on African continent, we see that the loss of biodiversity and also the effects of climate change are particularly observable according to IPCC in 2021. As in, however, these links between environmental factors and also the health need to be better understood locally to address this enormous challenge today and the future. So this is why The project for Sophia aims to strengthen One Health. Sorry, I think there is an issue. Okay. Sorry. So, okay, let me just continue. So the project Sophia aims to strengthen One Health and planetary health in Eastern Africa, and through planetary health education, research, and also community engagement. So we see that based on the current expertise of the partner universities, we are all expressing health challenges, especially in the Lake Victoria region. And we selected 4 thematic areas of focus that is connected with climate change and environmental factors. And these include nutrition and non-communicable diseases, child health, and also cancer and also infectious diseases. So for instance, we see that the schistosomiasis, next to expanding, and as a result, we see that next to expanding the planetary health education, we see through various activities, this project shall introduce planetary health lens on ongoing research and spiral discussions among researchers to foster more inter and transdisciplinary research. So we see that in order to strengthen planetary health, there is need to connect the health of anthropogenic action in areas considered unrelated to health, and also impacts assessment could be a game changer, for instance, to reach the SDG goals by policy changes in various areas. So we see that through this engagement, we did a number of activities during the summer school program. I think I have issues sharing the pictures. Yeah, so in the process, we were having a summer school program at Woodsburg, and we did a number of activities whereby this is not working, sorry. Oh. Yeah, sorry. So we've done a number of activities that I wanted to share where the students community were really engaged in. And we had students from different parts of Africa, Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, and also other regions here in Germany that really shared an amazing work together with the community. And as a result, with the networks that we have, we introduced the planetary health concept by Laura Jung, and also Dr. Sir Andy Haynes also talked to us about how to clean the cities and so on. And also as a result, we had amazing speakers like Sophie Gep, who has been amazing from the Global Health German. So we had amazing talks from them. And in the process also, we had to do practical activities like visiting one of the amazing agroforestry in Woodsburg, so that we could learn on how we tackle the forestry situation and also learn more about soils and so on. And in the process, the student community also learned about planetary health diet, how can we live sustainably? And as you can see from the pictures, like it's really good to do more of practical rather than just doing the talks. And then as a result of that, we also engage in a creative activity on how can we communicate climate change or in planetary health issues through creative arts. And it was really amazing on how we could use the power of art in communication. So in the process, we discussed also on how can we tackle mental distress using climate as in creative arts spaces. And then in the process, we also did more of practicals of cooking diets. And it was really amazing on how we could see during the summer school program that we should not really depend on the meat diet, but we really have to save the earth by focusing on plant diet. So as you can see from the pictures, these were some of the foods the student community prepared during the summer school, and it was really impactful for students to learn a lot from that. And also, apart from that, we were honored also to have Walter, he wrote a book on African handbooks of climate change adaptation. And in the process, the students were able to come up with their projects, as you can see. And in the process of coming up with case studies on climate change issues, we see that there are opportunities for students to collaborate afterwards, so that at least people could learn from how we could change from knowledge to transformative action. So in the process also, we had some interactive session whereby we were just discussing on how can we live together with the animals as in through synergizing One Health concept also in the planetary health space. And in the process also, we had gone for nature walk, because in most cases we live in cities and we forget about living sustainably in the forest. So for instance, we also visited one of the forests in Würzburg, and in the process we were able to connect with nature and so on. And it was really amazing to see that there is really power in connecting with nature rather than just us focusing on living in cities alone. So as a result of that, also the members of the Sophia project presented their work that they're doing in Eastern Africa region and different projects, as you can see from the pictures. And also we had incredible women from Nigeria and Gambia who talked more about gender issues and also issues to do with the children, because we know that women and children are the most vulnerable communities, as in peoples who are affected by climate change. So in the process also, we talked about how the purpose for communication, like there is a gap in communication in our research spaces, and there is need to communicate a lot more on how we could tackle these issues together. So in order to finish this conversation, I would like to say the advantages of engaging the youth in decision-making process. And we see that according to the United Nations, it has been long recognized that the youths, the young individuals are a major human resource for development and key agents for social change and economic growth and also technological innovations. So participation in decision-making is a key priority area at the UN agenda, and also we see young people are empowered to play a vital role in their own professional development also, as well as in their communities, because if we empower them, they're able to do activities related to climate change and health in order to save the earth. And then it's really important for them also for their own professional privileges, and also are vital to learn skills. So I would like to encourage us to be passionate about what we do to make the world a better place, and we need to mobilize the youth to take leadership opportunities. And that's why we have the Planetary Health Alliance, which supports campus ambassadors across the globe to champion for planetary health in their communities. So thank you so much for listening to me, despite the
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Melvin. And as we all can see, the youth and their leaders of today, not of tomorrow. And I really also enjoyed these examples. At the beginning of the summit, we saw how Chancellor Scholz said, we are here also to network, to create cooperations. And planetary health will be a reality when we have these conversations, also what we call the global south. So it's very interesting how we see these networks expanding and definitely bringing this conversation to the whole planet. Last but not least, we have, we were planning to have a discussion here, but we do have more time. We have Dr. Vibeke Rossig, who is director of the Cluster Science Society at the Falling Walls Foundation. And she's responsible for the Falling Walls Science Summit, the Berlin Science Week, and the Falling Walls Engaged Network. There is, I think you're going to share a little bit about this project and how we can engage the potential for science in engagement of planetary health. Please.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I'm here mostly as a representative for our network of 3,300 science engagement practitioners in 142 countries all around the world. And we focus on science engagement, which is adding to Susanne, maybe even a little broader, but focusing on a dialogue-oriented science communication and a focus on co-creation and mutual benefit in science engagement. So to give the word first to our network, actually, I have brought you a film, which I would ask you kindly to play now. Hopefully. Looks good. Yeah, well.
Well, we need planetary health given global warming and the perils that humanity faces.
For far too long, overlooked the damaging effects of human progress on natural ecosystems.
It's fundamental to our survival as a species. So we need to understand planetary health as an issue, and that takes communicating it to a wide audience.
So in other words, planetary health really reminds us that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
We have been historically the less contributing region to this catastrophe, though it's the region that is the most affected.
From a Mexican perspective, a very substantial percentage of the scientific community is already involved in research related with pollution, environment, water, toxicology, sustainability, removal of pollutants, community engagement, education, and outreach. Now, many of these researchers are looking into horizontal dialogues with First Nations, indigenous communities, and citizens in general to understand their questions.
And we have ways, actually, as part of our traditions to interact with our environment.
We respond to climate change here in Australia as one aspect of planetary health. Obviously has massive implications for really the survival of some of the Pacific Islands.
The Caribbean is very focused on making sure that we look at our issues, but also making sure that we are indeed a global partner.
There are sustainable management of ecosystems in tourism because we have a very big economy based on tourism in the whole region.
We use novel educational tools to get them to understand this importance. They're learning about the tree cover and the importance of these trees historically, also in terms of traditional medicine, as well as important contributions to our overall biodiversity.
Even the science engagement project, Superheroes Against Superbugs, that I'm involved in, which is on antibiotic resistance, we're not looking at the issue of drug-resistant infections only through the lens of biomedicine or human health, but we're keenly exploring the environmental aspects of the problem.
When we talk about engagement, and also the fact that planetary health is a concept, a framework of action, I think it's very important. How come people are so conscious, informed, and aware of an urgency that is coming? How come that it's so difficult, that there's this difficulty to turn into action?
I don't think one can really work without the other.
Planetary health and taking science to the public cannot be overestimated.
We need, as science engagers and scientists, to propose credible and viable solutions.
The two need each other, and I think there's a massive opportunity to focus on planetary health in the way that we communicate science.
Yeah, so I think the main message of that is like global crisis. We need a global answer to that, but adapted to local needs and realities. And we need to include these local perspectives and build on the knowledge and experience that is already there. So planetary health is a concept where people can relate to and bring their own perspectives and expertises from lived experience, non-academic background, indigenous knowledge, and it is open and well-defined at the same time. So for me, this is a concept where science engagement can really jump in and make a difference in the world. So and we have heard like many examples, so I'm trying to cut a little here. So we have already heard so many different aspects of how to engage on the topic of planetary health. But in our network, we invite experts and practitioners of science engagement to interact with each other and exchange on their work, and together on a regional level in these 9 regional hubs. We have worked together with the Planetary Health Alliance. Melvin was there in our hub in Kenya to talk about planetary health. And we really want to encourage all these practitioners to give their knowledge into this process now. So from our community network that we have established over the past years at Falling Walls Engage, we would now really want to create a network of action, a call for action with these science engagers. And I would like to invite all of you to be part of that and take this knowledge that we have gathered in our network on how science engagement works, how it works locally and regionally, and also how they can connect with each other and exchange their expertises, and how to adapt their format to local needs and bring the perspectives from these local communities back into the process of policy making and scientific research. So with that, I think I might have some time for the discussion as well.
Plans are made to be disrupted. Thank you so much. And then what is interesting, and we saw that what is driving planetary health is more than science, is the social movement, the commitment of this group. And many of you here in the audience, it's what I think keeps us going, despite all the crisis. And of course, we're not at the best moment but perhaps the planetary health brings us also, it's not only that we need to get out of the short term, right? It's the long-term change that we need. So that's a very important aspect. And as I promised, we do have 5-6 minutes that I would like to, we were going to have a 20 minutes panel discussion, then questions, but you know, we adapt. And I would like to know if you have any questions to our panelists, and I see one here. I would like to take maybe a group, if you have any 2 questions, maybe 3 maximum. And like, okay, so please introduce yourself and address your question.
Hi, thank you. I'm Laura Jung. I'm an infectious disease doctor from Germany and a member of the German Climate and Health Alliance. But I'm not coming with my own question. I wanted to bring a question from outside. There were climate scientists yesterday here in front of the building. On a side note, they glued research papers onto the hotel. As a researcher myself, I was like, that would be so cool if my research was so interesting, someone would actually glue them on the hotel. So they were saying they are a bit confused because usually they come to events where they have to still explain the climate emergency, but here they are sure everyone actually understands it, and they don't know why the people still don't make it a priority. And we're here in a pretty small room also, and I know many of the people in this room, which is great, but also means, or like for me poses the question, are we preaching to the converted, and are the right people in these rooms here?
Thank you, Laura. So if you could yes, be concise on the questions, that would be. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much, everyone. First of all, my name is Pablo Freudenthal. We conduct research on congenital heart disease in indigenous communities in Bolivia. Hence, my question goes mainly to Nicole and Wiebke. So how do you manage to translate indigenous science into peer-reviewed publications? And also to Wiebke, it's very beautiful to see that you are open globally to research from indigenous communities, sub-Saharan communities, etc. But how do you make the match between what is required in peer-reviewed research and methods that are applied in communities that are not European-centric?
Thank you. Final question. I think there was here in the front. Yes.
Thank you so much. It feels weird standing in the first row, so I sit down again. My name is Michael Voss. I am managing director of the Center for Planetary Health Policy. And since policymakers are also citizens, I'm wondering, how do we get the messages here from this room to them, and also engaging with them? And your ideas on this would be great.
Thank you so much. So how do we expand the field, how we translate the knowledge and putting this into peer-reviewed articles, and maybe this conflict of knowledge systems, perhaps, and how do we get the message to policymakers? A very important question as well, all of them. Thank you so much. So with 5 minutes and all these very easy questions, who would like to start? Nicole, could you maybe, that's a very specific one for you. So
yeah, absolutely. I'll kind of bridge them. The indigenous research methodologies have had a resurgence probably in the last 10 years, although there's been scholars in this space for decades. They've just been very quiet and their voices haven't been amplified within spaces. So it's a very delicate balance of how, but I love how you put it, you know, it's the knowledge translation piece that is the key. And that's the dance that we as indigenous scholars work. There's an elder by the name of Albert Marshall who talks about two-eyed seeing, one eye with the views of Western ways of knowing and one eye with the way of indigenous ways of knowing, and bringing the gift of multiple perspectives to the work. But we often have to adjust our ways of knowing to Western context. But I always say, why not the other way around? Why not we adjust Western systems to our systems and embody those within the scholarship that we have? Because it speaks to the heart. When people read our narratives, and there's many indigenous scholars to look up now, thankfully, in their research that really does that. It takes a decolonized approach. This is our way that we're doing things. Yes, we have to tweak some things sometimes for peer-reviewed journals, but it is possible in today's world with good navigation and some strategy involved. And then the last piece that I'll mention is I think the barrier that we have, why we have the preach to the choir problem, is because most of us are not working interdisciplinary. And that is the skill I find with indigenous scholars, because we cannot operate in one field, because that's not the way that our knowledge systems work. So 6 months ago, I was at an immunologist conference, 3 months ago to microbiologists, you know, others to physicists. The reason I can speak in all of those rooms is because that's how our indigenous frameworks work. I think we can learn a lot about those interdisciplinary dialogues so that we get out of the spaces that we're normally comfortable with and speak to different audiences through these meta narratives of interconnection between fields and science.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Yes, important of a cross-pollination of knowledge. That's an important message here. So, Big.
Yeah, maybe I'm not sure if I can answer this right, but we don't focus that much on peer-reviewed journal articles in our science engagement communities. We focus a lot more on debates and on contributing to the research scheme in general. And I think we can make sure that these voices are heard in the discourse, that they are integrated into debates, that and they're integrated into the research, and it's done and then a question of how to translate that into the research scheme to a peer-reviewed paper. But we all know that the peer-reviewed papers, if they are not glued to the hotel entrance, they are not read by as many people as we would need to take action. So we would probably need other ways of communication, and there it is again far easier to integrate different perspectives. Currently at the Falling Walls Foundation, we are trying to run a new format that we call cascading debates, where we ask our engagers to hold local debates in local communities and have them dribble down and be discussed on different regional levels, but then turn into a plenary table that we host on the 8th of November at the Falling Walls Science Summit, where decision makers discuss, and then they get the input from these different debates from completely different settings. But it's of course always a really difficult question how to translate that and make that really adapted to the language, again, that is very different also at the decision maker level table. So it's always play with words, and how do we frame that, and how do we really change it without losing the message. But yeah.
So thank you so much. And this question of the policymakers, perhaps, I don't know, Maria, if you have, we are here, it's important that we see how even the World Health Summit seems to be evolving. It's the first time we have even a topic, I think, food systems as it is. So we see that this is changing the narrative. We didn't have planetary health before. Now we take it for granted. We shouldn't, because we also worked hard to bring this conversation into this space. So I see evolution, and that's it's not by accident. I think we've been working hard on this, very hard actually. We're not here for the easy questions. So it's a process. But I don't know if anybody would like to comment a little bit more, maybe the importance of having the planetary health in this conference and how this could help to translate to policymakers.
One thing I would like to, I agree with this frustration of maybe talking to the converted. I want to think that we are talking to the converted to better align our troops and make sure that we go outside and we will make that revolution that we are all waiting for it. So it's a kind of preparation for it. But what we are doing with policymakers, it's putting them in front of something that we call the no excuses. I mean, no way for any mayor in few years from now or any policymaker saying, oh, I didn't know about pollution affecting the health of my citizens. No way. I mean, we want a non-excuse approach. So if we need to use the legislation, I think we need to go a little bit more for that as well. The WHO standards on air quality should be by law. That could be maybe something that will force us a little bit more on going into this sense. And again, we don't want to make policymakers responsible for the number of deaths. We want to do it the other way around, saying, okay, if you postpone the endorsement of some of the measures like the air quality guidelines that people is measuring, but then we need to do something about it. It's not just measuring. We need to then, next step is, what do you do with that? Put pressure on your politician, use your vote, and make sure that what you vote will have a program that will protect your health. So again, no excuses, putting the actions very clear there, because otherwise we use this on a beautiful way. I used to be a doctor as well, so I use this very much. You do your diagnosis, and once you have your diagnosis, you cannot leave. I mean, once you say, okay, this patient has this disease, okay, now so what? So yesterday I was a little bit frustrated when somebody says, and this is affecting more than everyone, women and girls, and everybody, yes. Excuse me, we know that. So what for? What next? So what next? Therefore, because affect most women and girls, we are doing this, and that. So I think we need to take this, and now the next one is the prescription. So now we need to take our pen and start to prescribe. And starting by ourselves, giving good example, leading by example, reducing our carbon footprint, whether we are in a student, whether we are an international organization, whether we are civil society, start to have very clear prescriptions, applying to yourself, and hopefully we will see the good results on our patient. Thank you.
Okay.
You know, my mother was not an indigenous, just one thing. I mean, my mother was from the north of Spain, and we cultivate a little space of flowers and tomatoes and something like that. But she was wise in the sense that that piece of land, you need to protect it. I mean, you will not put anything dangerous there. At the contrary, you make sure that you have the right shadow, the right. So, I mean, something very logical. So I love what you say about we are nature. I mean, it's not two things. We are nature. Let's be common sense again and going to the basic. I love that the nature thing is, I am nature. I like the star. I feel it.
Okay. 1 minute.
We are all stars.
Thank you, Laura, for posing the question. If we're in the right room. Richard Feynman once said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So we have to leave the room and be more active. I totally agree. And we have a fire alarm. Oh, is it? Oh, okay. I wanted to thank Laura for her question, if we're in the right room. Richard Feynman once said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So if you're the most knowledgeable person about planetary health, you're also in the wrong room. We should acknowledge that the protests have a double function. First of all, there's a fire alarm. Mother Earth is burning. We have a hothouse. So they're right in the one way. As a media person, I'm really worried that the only thing that will be transported in mainstream media about the WHS will be the protests. So this is why I'm really ambiguous about this. And Susanne, the one example that how to influence politicians was in Bavaria, in a part of Germany. They had a people's vote about the dying of the insects. And 1.7 million people voted that they care about biodiversity. And this for the conservatives was really a shock, because 1.7 million is much more than just the green portion of the society, which is something between 15 and 20%. So these votes have some similarity to citizen science, and we can use this as a way of getting politicians on the agenda. And for all the German-speaking people, Maren Ohner did a great job at the K3 Congress on how the apocalypse fatigue nourishes looking away. And she opened her presentation with the question, what is the most important currency in the world? And the answer was calories. So the food system with agriculture and the whole idea of why do we need so many 400 Nutztiere, cattle for each person on this planet. Kim always says that 10,000 years ago we were 1% human beings, 99% wildlife, and now we have a third human beings, 2/3 cattle, and only a couple of percent left for all the other wildlife, and this is killing us. So why don't we start each day with what's on our table and look beyond the tellerrand? Thank you.
We have 2 minutes, I think, left, and I'm so sorry because I know there are more questions, but I think 30 seconds, if you can.
Yes, thanks. Mike, thanks for your question. Yes, yeah, it's on. Thanks for your question. I'm so grateful you're in the room, because that's your expertise as well, right? To bring, how do we bring the politicians at our tables? And we as a museum as well, we really have a political understanding of facilitating communication, conversations around planetary health issues. And also as a citizen science community, we try to always think in the quadruple of science, society, policy, and industry, and trying to bring them together in, for instance, local activities where we get engaged with each other.
Thank you so much. And I think before we are cut on also on our online audience, I would just like to thank our wonderful panelists, our audience. And I'm very pleased also to see now that the more I research, the more I work with the food systems, we won't have planetary health without tackling this topic very strongly. So I count on you and your support. We have the new space for that, the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub, trying to bring this conversation to policymakers. So that's a new space that we can act. And I would like to close with a very simple suggestion that we can heal our planet. We have to make schools affordable, safe, and accessible to all girls around the world. That's a very simple solution, no need for a very high tech. And we know that when we have educated women, we have healthier people and support. So let's start also with the easy, the low hanging fruits there. With that, thank you, all of you, for being here. Go to different rooms, go to the rooms that, and I see a very burning question, if you can make this very.
1 second, if we are all converted to the fact that we don't have a solution and we need to get together in different rooms, then you're converted that the World Health Summit is an important event to not just sit and see who is of your opinion, but see the other opinions. And I think, Nicole, you said it. I think interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity and talking to other people who are not of your opinion, then you're right, and then you're right at the World Health Summit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, thank you all. I hope to see in the next rooms. We'll continue the conversation, and please let's connect and see how we can take this out of this room and to around the planet. Have a good World Health Summit. Thank you.